everyone, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. So today we're going to be doing a video on why Oregon is going to be the Kansas of the 2022 midterms. So those of you who don't know, Kansas, which is commonly seen as a safe Republican state, sure, it only went to Trump by like 14 points in 2020, but that was bad environment, strong suburban turnout, and Kansas is not going blue is what I'm saying. People are saying Kansas is going to be the next Georgia. It's only to Trump by 14 points. Yeah, sure, Kansas City area is growing a bit, but Kansas is fine. We're chilling in Kansas. Kansas is going to be safe Republican for a while, although Kansas does have a Democratic governor in Laura Kelly. And Laura Kelly was first elected in the blue wave year of 2018. Now, although Democrats dominated across the country, Laura Kelly was only elected because of the third-party candidate Greg Orman, who absolutely screwed over the Republicans and allowed Laura Kelly to swoop in and get the victory. Greg Orman was a businessman who ran for governor of Kansas. He was kind of like this pragmatic, centrist, independent guy. He only received 6% of the vote. That was more than enough to screw over the Republican Chris Kobach. And if you look up at the map, a lot of the counties Orman did best in were the suburban counties who tend to vote Republican, but they're a little more moderate than the rural parts of the state. And had Greg Orman not ran, well, yeah, Laura Kelly might have probably won anyway just because of the environment. And Greg Orman was kind of a moderate, so I'm sure he did take away at least a few Democratic votes. The race at least would have been much, much closer, probably like only by a couple thousand votes, if that. So this leads us to 2022, where a similar situation is actually going down in Oregon. So in Oregon, the incumbent governor, Kate Brown, as you probably have heard, is term limited, meaning she cannot run for re-election. And there are plenty of Democrats running, including former State House Speaker Tina Kotek and State Treasurer Tobias Reed. Now, Oregon is a safe Democratic state, and in a normal year, the Democrats probably wouldn't even need to worry about whether or not they would win in Oregon and hold on. But 2022 is going to be different. The national environment is increasingly favorable to the GOP, and Biden is underwater in many safe blue states, including Oregon, at least in some polls. That means some polls have Biden down in Oregon by a lot. I don't really buy a lot of those, but some of them have it about 50-50. I think Biden's probably just barely treading water in Oregon. He's probably maybe approved by a couple points or so, maybe like one or two. He's probably approved by one or two, just because of how big Portland is. Well, actually, Biden might be underwater in Oregon just because of I take that back. I take that back. I think Biden is underwater in Oregon because of the progressives in Portland who will not vote Republican even if their life depended on it, but they just don't like Biden because he's, too moderate or too incompetent. He's too much of a too establishmentarian thus far. He's not progressive enough. So I think Biden is probably underwater in Oregon, but in terms of the Democratic Party turnout, I'd expect Democrats probably to do very well overall. I think that a lot of the Biden being down in Oregon is not only Republicans, but I think there's just a shit ton of progressives who are like, you know what, Biden's done nothing for us. We don't like him, but we're still going to vote Democrat every single election because we're absolute retards. No offense to any progressives out there. I'm sure you guys are great people, but my personal take on progressives, you guys are great people. You have noble and honest goal. You just go out at the absolutely worst way possible. So I have nothing. I honestly think that progressives are good. There's people on the right. They're like, you guys are crazy. You lost your minds. You guys are nuts. I don't think that. I think progressives, honestly, they have good intentions. They just go at it the complete wrong way, and they mess things up. Honestly, that's my thoughts on progressives. We do a little bit of ranting. Anywho, the Oregon governor race actually shows a semi-competitive race. We go down here real quickly back to the polling. As you can see, the generic Democrat is only beating a generic Republican by 9 points. This was done in January 18th to 2022. There were only 400 votes sampled, but still, this is a pretty interesting thing to note. The Democrat only led the Republican by 9 points, with 29% undecided. So, with the national environment favoring the GOP and the nationwide, a race already showing the Democrats only beating the Republicans by about 9 points. It makes things interesting for sure, and definitely a lot has changed even since January. So this is very interesting to note. And to make these things even more interesting, we have a third-party independent candidate in Betsy Johnson, who is running as an independent, centrist but populist, and she has endorsements from some Republicans and some Democrats. And so Betsy Johnson, now her politics are very hard to describe. She has some super liberal progressive takes, like she's pro-choice under literally any circumstance, and she's a big supporter of gay and trans rights. But she actually does have some conservative views, including a balanced budget, ending COVID restrictions, and actually tax cuts for families with kids. Which the tax cuts for families with kids, in my opinion, is actually super based, which is kind of like that family first pro-family agenda the conservatives have been trying to run on, at least my faction of the Republican Party and the conservative movement. Although that kind of stuff, like the tax credits for families, a lot of that stuff, that's she supports all of that stuff. So she's kind of cringe on some issues, but you got to admit she is based on a few issues. So she's kind of this interesting center-left independent. And although she is good on like maybe one on the issue in terms of tax cuts for families with kids, she is still a center-left independent, and she's going to siphon more votes from Democrats than Republicans. Her left-leaning views on abortion and gay rights make it very hard for me to believe that more than a few centrist, cringe, ancestral Republican suburbanites who held their nose for Trump or maybe even voted Libertarian are going to vote for her. And so Betsy Johnson, as you can see down here, is already doing very well in a poll done by DHM Research, showing her at 11% already. And this was back in January, and her campaign was really just getting started back then. And with the recent Oregon governor elections being relatively close, I think Kate Brown only won by like 7 points back in 2018, Betsy Johnson may seriously screw over the Democrats. And I mean, in a massive red wave year like 2022 is going to be, and Democrats' vote being split, I could seriously see Oregon electing a Republican governor due to vote splitting. Is it possible? Is it likely to happen? No. Is it too early to tell? We have very little polling, and no one's really talking about this race, which is interesting. But it is definitely possible. And I think it's too early to make an honest analogy. I'm still putting the race as probably safe to likely Democrat at most, probably safe still, because I mean even then this poll has the Democrats up by 9, which is just barely likely for my margin. So this race is too early to tell in my opinion. There definitely is something brewing here, but I think it's just too early to say for sure. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more, and we'll be back at it with a new video coming very soon.